Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is ace. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. Thank you so much for sharing this great idea. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might hear ace used can mean to outdo someone in a competitive situation. So if we use this to describe how someone has done, again, in a competition, right? It generally has a positive meaning, at least for that person, right? Because they're doing better, they're outperforming. A second way you might hear ace used is in connection to schoolwork. So many people will use it to describe the action of getting an A or kind of a top score on a test or an exam. I've heard it used in particular to mean like I had a perfect score. I didn't miss a single question. Now, a third way you might encounter this verb ace will be in the sport of tennis. So it's when one person, the server, serves the ball to an opponent, and the opponent is really unable to touch the shot or return it. Okay? A fourth way to use our verb ace is in the sport of golf. And so it can be used to mean that someone has made a hole in one. So from their very first shot, they were able to get the ball into the hole. For now, you should know that ace is a regular verb. If you want to form the progressive form of the verb, drop the E on the end before you add ing. That makes acing. The past tense and the participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Now our base verb, ace, it ends with the letter CE, but the sound it ends with is an S sound, and that is unvoiced. This means the ED ending is going to make a T sound, and I'm not going to add an extra syllable as I say it. So it should sound like this. Aced, aced. Okay. Now, there are a couple of phrasal verbs you might encounter. One is to ace in or ace into. Many people will use this to describe the action of being allowed entry into something, especially when there's good luck involved. Let's take a look at an example of this. How did you ace into that company straight from undergrad? So the wording here might sound a little confusing, but what I can tell from this type of question is someone is working at a very desirable yet very competitive place that maybe typically doesn't hire people without a lot of experience. So someone else is suggesting, wow, you got so fortunate to be able to start working at this particular place immediately after you have finished your 4-year undergraduate degree. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to ace out. This can have a couple different meanings. One might be to narrowly escape a bad situation. Example of this, they aced out of getting a detention by slipping into the bathroom. So in this sentence, I'm sort of picturing middle schoolers, high schoolers who aren't supposed to be in the hallway or they aren't supposed to be in a particular place, but they are. They hear maybe a teacher or a principal coming down the hall, and to avoid getting caught, they kind of hide in the bathroom. So they have narrowly escaped the punishment of having to stay late after school, which is what detention is in this sentence. A second way you might hear ace out used can mean to outmaneuver or outperform someone in order to reach a victory. So it's pretty common to encounter this in discussions of sports, of athletic competitions. So an example of this, he was leading the entire race, but he was aced out by his biggest rival in the last 5 meters of the race. So we're talking about a very short distance here at the very end. So someone had been in the lead position, but they were outperformed at the very end of the race. Now let's continue using our verb of the day ace, and we'll use it in a couple different verb tenses. Today we'll practice the simple past tense and the simple future with will. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. Sometimes in our simple past tense sentences, you will see time signals. Could be a word like yesterday, something like 2 weeks ago. Ago is a good signal for the past. You might see a specific date in the past as well. Okay? But not every sentence in the simple past tense is going to have a time signal. It can be understood through a longer passage or through conversation that we're talking about a known point in the past. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense, though, is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So here, we're going to start in the affirmative with our subject, and then we're going to use that ed form of the verb. An example of this. This candidate aced all of our interviewing questions. We have to hire her. Right? Well, this is suggesting someone has performed really, really well. Even though it's not really like an exam in school, interviews can be a bit of a test. So we might be saying like this person answered perfectly. That must be the right person for the job. Now, if you want to make a negative simple past tense sentence, what you're going to do is start with your subject, use did not, and then use your base verb, okay? Not the ed form there. An example of this. These restaurants didn't ace their August health inspections. Sometimes I see headlines like that in my local newspaper, and it always makes me think, oh no, not a place I really, really enjoy. Right? I don't want to be kind of grossed out by things that aren't following our rules. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, start with did, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. Again, notice we're not using the ed form of the verb. The only time we're doing that is in the affirmative or with positive sentences. So an example of a yes or no question might be, did you ace that test? I've heard students leaving classes and asking each other questions a bit similar to this, right? We kind of want to know, how confident are you about how you performed? Now let's take a look at the simple future. To do this, we are going to be making sentences in the same way, no matter what our subject is. Right? So we'll start with our subject, we're going to use will, and then our base verb. An example of this might be, this new collection will ace your off-court style. So here, this sentence is borrowed from an advertisement, trying to get people to be excited about, be interested in, and ultimately purchase clothing from this newer group of clothes that are being marketed. Many times we're going to see that will and a base verb used as offers, promises, and predictions are being made. So one might say this ad is trying to predict, you are going to look fantastic. Another example of a negative simple future sentence will follow the pattern of subject, will not, and then the base verb. What can be a little confusing is when we combine will not, we'll form the contraction won't. W-O-N''T. An example of this. He won't ace me this next game. So maybe someone is playing tennis. Maybe they're talking to a coach, another supporter of some kind, right? They're maybe either making a promise or a prediction, right? I'm going to return everything that comes my way. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with will, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. Another example, will less skilled cooks ace these dishes? So I heard someone asking for kind of, again, that might be a mix of a promise and a prediction, meaning that some recipes can be really, really difficult to follow. And if you're with cooking, then you might find this to also be challenging. So I wanted to know, these particular dishes, can people who are not so skilled still perform well? Finally, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb ace. And the first word we're going to look at is the noun form of this word. The noun ace has a number of different meanings. But you'll notice it has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. So one way to use the noun ace is to talk about a playing card. It has a single spot on it, and for most games, it is ranked as the highest card in its suit. So think diamonds, hearts, spades, clubs. And again, this is most card games, but not every. So you might hear somebody ask, how many aces did you have in that hand? Right? So they're wanting to know, out of all the cards, right, how many had that single spot on it. A second way you'll hear the noun ace used can be to talk about someone who excels, maybe in a particular sport or some other activity. An example of this: she's been a swimming ace her whole life. Right? So has, again, a really positive meaning to it, someone who performs really, really well. Connected to that, a third way to use the noun ace is to talk about a pilot, particularly a fighter pilot. So think of with the military, and one who has shot down many enemy aircraft. This would frequently be used to describe pilots in World War II. In case you're reading history, this might be a place where you'd find this noun a lot. So an example of that: the class is reading a story about World War II aces. This is another way to say pilots, people who were flying and attempting to attack and defeat another country's military. A fourth way we can use the noun ace is to, again, describe a tennis serve or service that an opponent is unable to touch. So, of course, the server's going to win the point. An example of this: here's a former professional tennis player, John Eisner, hit 113 aces in one match. It's kind of a crazy statistic. So think about that. He served 113 times, and his opponent was unable to return those serves. One last definition here for our noun ace. Again, it goes back to the fourth definition of our verb. So in the sport of golf, we can use ace to describe a hole in one. An example of this: Mansell Davis has the all-time record with 51 aces. Here we're talking about a golfer who has taken a single shot and been able to hit the ball into the cup or hole. Another word that's connected here, again, same spelling, same pronunciation, but I wanted you to be aware that ace can be used as an adjective. And really what it means is just describing someone or something that is very good. An example of this: who are the ace students in this class? So again, wanting to know about the strongest performers. One last phrase. You might hear someone talk about having an ace in the hole. So this might be an effective or decisive argument or some type of resource that someone is holding back or is being held in reserve, right? And they're keeping it, maybe in hopes they don't have to use it, but should they need some kind of advantage, perhaps in their argument or in a difficult situation, they have this to use. An example of this: the candidate's personal favorability rating will be their ace in the hole for the upcoming election. So this might suggest that things are rather competitive, rather tight, but maybe in the end, the fact that this person is more likable might propel them to victory. That might be sort of the resource they're holding back on. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's verb. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.